The rain over the cemetery in Boston didn't wash anything clean. It just made the mud slick and the gray sky heavy. I stood there, my boots sinking into the wet earth, with my hand resting firmly on the shoulder of my youngest grandson, Jeffrey. He was only 14, shaking like a leaf, his tears mixing with the drizzle running down his face. We were burying his mother, my only daughter, Virginia. She was 48. Too young. Far too young. I looked across the open grave at the man who had been her husband for 2 decades. Edward stood there in a tailored black trench coat that cost more than my first car. His eyes were dry, not a single tear. He was checking his watch, actually checking his watch while his wife was being lowered 6 feet down. Standing next to him was Dominic, my oldest grandson. At 26, Dominic was a carbon copy of his father, vain, impatient, and holding a cell phone half concealed in his palm, scrolling thumb. A cold shiver that had nothing to do with the November chill ran down my spine. My gut was screaming at me. I've been a structural architect for 40 years. I know when a foundation is rotten, even if the house looks pretty on the outside. And looking at Edward and Dominic, I saw rot. If you have ever had a gut feeling that warned you about someone close to you, and you ignored it only to regret it later, hit that like button right now. It shows me I'm not the only one who has felt this darkness. Jeffrey leaned into me, sobbing quietly. "Grandpa Logan," he whispered, "why isn't Dad sad? Why isn't he crying?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break the boy's heart further. I just squeezed his shoulder. "I'm here, Jeff. I'm right here. We need to look out for each other in this world. Please, share this story with someone you trust, someone who needs to be reminded to keep their eyes open. And while you are getting settled in for the truth of what happened, let me know in the comments where you are watching from tonight. I read every single one, and I appreciate you being here with me." The ceremony ended, and the priest closed his book. Edward didn't even throw a flower into the casket. He just turned, signaled to Dominic, and walked toward his sleek black sedan without looking back. The wake was held at Virginia's house in the historic district. It was a sprawling Victorian property she had restored herself. She loved that house. It was her soul in timber and brick. I stood in the corner of the living room, holding a cup of black coffee that had gone cold, watching the mourners. Most were Edward's business associates, talking about stock prices and zoning laws in hushed tones. Dominic slid up next to me, smelling of expensive cologne and mints. "Grandpa Logan," he said, his voice smooth, lacking any real jagged edge of grief. "We need to talk about the property." I turned to him, my brow furrowing. "The property? Your mother has been in the ground for 2 hours, Dominic." I know, he said, waving a hand dismissively. "But Dad and I were talking. The market in Boston is peaking right now. It's volatile. We think it's best to liquidate the asset immediately. You know, for closure. It's too painful to keep." "Liquidate?" I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. "This is your brother's home. It's your home." "It's a house, Grandpa. Just wood and stone." Edward appeared behind Dominic, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. The unity between them was unnerving. "He's right, Logan. I've already contacted a broker. We want to list it quietly starting Monday." I stared at him. My son-in-law wanted my daughter's house sold. What I found in her hidden safe destroyed his life. "Monday?" I asked, my voice rising just enough to turn a few heads. "You can't be serious. Virginia's things are still in the closets. Her scent is still in the hallways." "We need to move quickly," Edward said, his eyes hard and flat like shark eyes. Stalling is just wallowing. The tension in the room spiked. I set my coffee cup down on a side table with a loud clatter. You aren't selling anything until I have walked through this house and collected my daughter's personal effects. That is not a request, Edward. Edward's jaw tightened. I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. He didn't like being told no. He was a man used to bulldozing his way through life, usually with Virginia's money paving the road. You have 2 days, Edward snapped. I'll take a week, I countered, crossing my arms. And I'll do it alone. I don't want you or Dominic hovering over me while I say goodbye to my daughter. Fine, Edward spat. A week. But Jeffrey is coming with us to my sister's place in New Hampshire. He shouldn't be here surrounded by death. I want to stay with Grandpa, Jeffrey cried out from the hallway, having overheard us. No, Dominic said, stepping toward his younger brother. You're coming with us, Squirt. Grandpa Logan is confused. He needs space. I didn't like it. Every instinct in my body screamed to grab Jeffrey and run, but I had no legal standing. Edward was his father. If I caused a scene now, they'd lock me out of the house forever, and I'd never find out what was really going on. Go with them, Jeff, I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. I'll call you every night. I promise. Edward inherited Jeffrey out the door within 10 minutes. The house went silent, but the silence felt heavy, charged with secrets waiting to be unearthed. The next morning, I returned to the house alone. The rain had stopped, but the fog was thick, pressing against the windows. I started in Virginia's study. I knew my daughter. She was organized, meticulous. If there was a reason Edward was so desperate to sell, it would be here. I spent hours going through tax returns and bills in the filing cabinet, but everything seemed normal, too normal. It was sanitized. I moved to the master bedroom. It was difficult being in there. Her perfume, a soft lavender scent, still clung to the curtains. I sat on the edge of her bed and wept for 10 minutes, just letting the old man's grief pour out of me. When I wiped my eyes, I noticed something odd about the large oil painting of the coastline hanging opposite the bed. It was slightly crooked. Virginia was a perfectionist. She never hung anything crooked. I stood up and walked over to it. When I shifted the frame, I saw the wall behind it wasn't flush. There was a faint seam in the wainscoting. I ran my fingers along the wood, feeling for a latch. A hidden pressure plate clicked, and a small section of the paneling popped open. A wall safe. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had designed the addition to this house for them 10 years ago. This safe was not in the blueprints. She had installed it later. I tried her birthday. Error. I tried her wedding anniversary. Error. Then I tried Jeffrey's birthday. Click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside, it wasn't jewelry or gold. It was a stack of cash, about $85,000, banded in 50s. A black USB drive and a white envelope with my name on it. I took the letter out, my hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped it. I sat back down on the bed and opened it. After my daughter's funeral, my son-in-law said, "Sell the house now. Move on fast." But sorting through Virginia's bedroom, I found a hidden safe with a note inside. "Dad, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Check the flash drive. Protect Jeffrey. They killed me." I opened it, and everything flipped. I read the line again. They killed me. The air left the room. My daughter hadn't died of a sudden aneurysm, as the coroner stated. She had been murdered, and she knew it was coming. I looked at the cash, then back at the note. She had been preparing an escape. She was trying to save herself and Jeffrey. But she had run out of time. If you are the kind of person who would burn the world down to protect your family, if you believe that justice is worth any price, please subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring these stories to light, and it tells me you stand on the side of truth. I pocketed the flash drive and the letter. I left the cash. I couldn't make it look like a robbery. I closed the safe, replaced the panel, and straightened the picture. I walked out of that house a different man. Logan Wayne, the grieving architect, was gone. In his place was a hunter. I drove straight to my apartment, locked the deadbolt, and plugged the USB drive into my laptop. The folder structure was clear. Evidence, bank records, audio logs. I opened the bank records first. Edward's construction firm wasn't just struggling. It was a corpse propped up by fraud. He was $7 million in debt. He had leveraged every asset he owned, and then he had started forging Virginia's signature to leverage hers. He had taken out loans against the Victorian house. He had drained joint savings. But the kicker was the life insurance. 3 months ago, the policy on Virginia had been increased to $5 million. The signature on the authorization form was a shaky imitation of my daughter's elegant script. He needed her dead to pay off the sharks. If she divorced him, the financial forensic accountants would find the fraud, and he would go to prison for 20 years. Murder was his only golden parachute. I clicked on the folder labeled Texts. These were screenshots Virginia had managed to capture from Edward's iPad, which was synced to his phone. The conversation wasn't between Edward and a mistress. It was between Edward and Dominic. Dominic: "She's asking questions about the Cayman accounts, Dad. We're running out of runway." Edward: "I can't stall her anymore. She's threatening to call her lawyer." Dominic: "Then we do it this week. The inventory arrived. It needs to look like natural causes. No loose ends." Edward: "What about the kid?" Dominic: "Jeffrey doesn't know anything. Once she's gone, we control his trust fund too. That's another $1.2 million. We need that liquidity." I had to look away from the screen. My stomach is heavy. Dominic, my own grandson. He wasn't just complicit. He was the architect of the murder. He was pushing his father to kill his mother for money. They looked at Jeffrey, not as a brother or son, but as a piggy bank to be smashed open. I opened the folder labeled Journal. It was a video diary. Virginia sat in front of a webcam, looking pale, dark circles under her eyes. The timestamp was 3 weeks ago. "I don't know who will see this," she whispered to the camera, "but I think I'm being poisoned. Edward has been bringing me hot cocoa every night. He insists on it. He stands there and watches me drink it. About an hour later, my heart starts racing. I feel dizzy. I saved a sample in a vial and hid it in the garden shed inside the old paint can." She coughed, a wet rattling sound. I looked up the symptoms. It matches Digitalist toxicity. Foxglove. It builds up slowly. It mimics a heart attack. I'm scared, Dad. I'm trying to get Jeffrey and leave, but I feel so weak. If I die, please don't let them take Jeffrey. The video cuts to black. They had poisoned her slowly, night after night, smiling at her while they stopped her heart. My phone rang, jarring me out of the horror. The caller ID showed Edward. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to be steady. "Hello?" "Logan." Edward's voice was clipped. "Change of plans. The buyer wants to do a walkthrough tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I need you out of the house by tonight." "Tonight?" I felt confusion. I thought I had a week. The offer is too good, Logan. Don't be difficult. Did you find anything important? Any papers? The question hung in the air. He was fishing. He knew she might have hidden evidence. Just photo albums, Edward, I lied. Just memories. I'll be out by 6. Good, he said. Oh, and Jeffrey sends his love. He's sleeping right now. Let me speak to him, I demanded. He's sleeping, Logan. Don't wake him. We'll see you at the closing. The line went dead. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. He's sleeping in the middle of the day? They were accelerating the timeline. I didn't call the police station main line. I called Detective Miller directly. Miller and I had served in the reserves together 30 years ago. He was the head of major crimes now. Miller, I said as soon as he picked up, I need you to meet me. Not at the station. The diner on 4th Street. Now. Logan? You sound like hell. What's going on? It's Virginia. It wasn't natural causes, Miller. I have proof, and I think they have Jeffrey. I'm 10 minutes out, Miller said, his tone instantly shifting from friend to cop. I grabbed the laptop, the drive, and the letter. I ran out the door. I needed to move fast. If Edward suspected I knew, Jeffrey was a loose end they couldn't afford to leave untied. At the diner, I slid the laptop across the booth to Miller. He watched the video diary. He read the texts. His face, usually stone, went pale. Sweet Mother of God, Miller whispered. This is a conspiracy to commit capital murder. They have Jeffrey, I said, leaning over the table. They took him to Edward's sister's place in New Hampshire. But Edward just called me. He sounded final. Miller pulled out his phone. I'm putting a bolo out on Edward and Dominic. I'm sending a squad to the sister's house in New Hampshire right now. He made the call. I watched him pace the diner. 2 minutes later, he came back to the booth. The sister isn't in New Hampshire, Miller said grimly. She's in Florida for the winter. The house up there is empty. Neighbors say nobody has been there for months. They lied. I slammed my fist on the table. They didn't take him to the aunt's house. Think, Logan, Miller urged. Where else would they go? Do they have other properties? Edward has a cabin, I realized. A hunting lodge, up in Vermont, near the border. It's off the grid. He used to brag that you couldn't find it on a GPS. We need a location, Miller said. I don't have the address, I admitted, desperate. Then I remembered. The iPad. Virginia's iPad. She synced it to Jeffrey's phone for safety last year. She showed me how to use the Find My Family app. I opened the web browser on my laptop, logging into Virginia's cloud account. I guessed the password. Jeffrey 2012. A map popped up. A single blue dot was moving north on Interstate 91, crossing into Vermont. I got them, I said. They are heading to the Green Mountains. Miller coordinated with the Vermont State Police, but he told me to stay put. The hell I will, I said, already walking to my truck. Logan, don't do anything stupid, Miller yelled after me. I'm not going to let them hurt him, Miller. Get your guys there, but I'm going. I drove like a maniac. The drive to Vermont usually took 3 hours. I made it in 2. The weather turned nasty as I hit the mountain passes, sleet turning into heavy snow. My old pickup truck fishtailed on the icy switchbacks, but I kept the pedal down. The blue dot on the screen had stopped moving deep in the woods, miles from the nearest paved road. I killed the headlights as I turned onto the fire road leading to the cabin coordinates. The snow was crunching under my tires. I parked a half-mile out and walked the rest of the way, clutching a heavy iron tire I'd grabbed from under my seat. I wasn't a man of violence, But for Jeffrey, I would become one. The cabin was a dark A-frame set against a backdrop of pine trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. Edward's black sedan was parked out front next to Dominic's sports car. I crept up to the side of the house, moving through the shadows. The snow dampened my footsteps. I found a window at the back and peered in. The interior was lit by the fireplace. Jeffrey was sitting on a wooden chair, looking despondent. Dominic was pacing, holding a sheet of papers. Edward was pouring himself a drink. I pressed my ear against the cold glass. "Just sign the papers, Jeff," Dominic was saying, his voice aggressive. "It transfers the trust fund management to Dad until you're 21. It's standard procedure." "I don't want to," Jeffrey sobbed. "Mom said I shouldn't sign anything. She said the money was for college." "Mom is dead," Edward roared, slamming his glass down. Jeffrey flinched. "She's dead, and she left us in a mess. We need that money to save the company, to save this family." "You didn't cry?" Jeffrey whispered, his voice trembling but defiant. "At the funeral. You checked your watch." Edward walked over to the boy and leaned down, his face twisted in a sneer. "Because it was over, Jeffrey. A problem solved. And now, you are becoming a problem." "Did you hurt her?" Jeffrey asked, his voice barely audible. "Did you hurt Mom?" Dominic laughing, a cruel high sound. "She hurt herself, kid. By trying to ruin us. We just helped nature along." Rage, white-hot and blinding, took over. I didn't wait for the police. I didn't wait for backup. I ran to the back door. It was locked. I swung the tire iron with all the strength of a grief-stricken father and smashed the glass pane. I reached in, unlocked the deadbolt, and kicked the door open. The wind and snow swirled in behind me as I stepped into the cabin. "Get away from him!" I bellowed. Edward spun around, shock registering on his face. Dominic dropped the papers. "Grandpa?" Jeffrey cried out, jumping from the chair. "Logan?" Edward's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" "I know everything, Edward," I said, raising the iron bar. "The poison, the digitalis, the insurance fraud. The police are on their way. It's over." Edward's face changed from shock to a cold, deadly resolution. He reached behind the wet bar and pulled out a revolver. "You should have just sold the house, Logan," Edward said, raising the gun. "You old fool." "Run, Jeff," I screamed, stepping between the gun and my grandson. "Node." Jeffrey grabbed my coat. "Shoot him, Dad," Dominic yelled. "Do it." Edward cocked the hammer. I braced myself for the bullet, praying I could take the hit and keep standing long enough to bash his skull in. Crash. The front door exploded inward. "State police! Drop the weapon!" Red and blue lights flooded the room through the windows. Miller had come through. A team of tactical officers swarmed the room. Edward freezes. For a second, I thought he would shoot me anyway. Then he looked at the laser sights dancing on his chest. He slowly lowered the gun. Dominic, the coward, immediately dropped to his knees, hands behind his head. It was him. It was all Dad's idea. I just did what he told me. "Shut up, you traitor," Edward hissed as the officers tackled him to the floor. I held Jeffrey while they cuffed them. I covered his eyes so he wouldn't see his father and brother being dragged away like the garbage they were. The following months were a blur of legal proceedings. The hardest part was the exhumation. We had to disturb Virginia's rest to prove the poison. The toxicology report came back positive for lethal levels of digitalis. The trial was swift. The evidence Virginia had gathered was bulletproof. The video diary played in the courtroom, silencing everyone. when Virginia's voice filled the room, accusing her husband from beyond the grave. Even the defense attorney looked down in shame. Edward was sentenced to life without parole. Dominic turned state's witness to try and save himself. But the judge wasn't having it. He gave Dominic 20 years for conspiracy and attempted fraud. I sold the Victorian house. I couldn't let Jeffrey live there anymore. Too many ghosts. We used the money to buy a smaller place near the coast in Maine, far away from Boston. Jeffrey had a hard time. He had nightmares. He had trust issues. Who wouldn't? But we went to therapy. We got a dog, a golden retriever named Buster. We took long walks on the beach. Slowly, the light came back into his eyes. He started doing well in school again. He joined the debate team. He told me one night, while we were cooking dinner, "Grandpa, I want to be a prosecutor. I want to put guys like Dad away." "You'll be a great one, kid," I told him. "The best." 2 years later, while unpacking the last of the boxes in the garage, I found a book I had taken from Virginia's safe. Tucked inside the back cover was a second envelope I had missed that chaotic day. It was addressed to my surviving boys. I called Jeffrey into the garage. He was 16 now, taller, broader. We sat on the tailgate of the truck and read it together. If you are reading this, it means the worst has happened, but also that you won. Dad, thank you for being the safety net you always were. Jeffrey, my sweet boy, don't let this turn your heart to stone. Evil is real, but only as love. Your father and brother chose money. We choose each other. Blood makes you relatives. Loyalty makes you family. We sat there for a long time, watching the dust motes dance in the afternoon sun. "She saved us," Jeffrey said quietly. "Yeah," I nodded, putting an arm around him. "She did." We walked back toward the house, leaving the darkness in the past. We had a future to build. Before you go, if you believe that family is defined by love and not just blood, please subscribe to this channel. It's a small click for you, but it helps us keep these memories alive and reminds us all that in the end, truth wins. Thank you for listening.